Sorry, Chris.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
I'm not at Stanford. I resigned about a year ago, so I'm working for a Invisible International right now, and working to get to help tick-borne diseases. So, but I'm a
oh,
free. You can just say I'm a freelance science writer. That's the best thing right now.
yeah, she didn't put that honestly in your sheet here. There's no. I mean, I knew that was mentioned like on under a couple things, like the bio. See, I usually don't read the bio. I read what she prints up for me on your little sheet here,
Okay.
because she
Yeah,
she gives me a
I'll update her then.
okay. And like I said, I'm coming into this one fresh, and I didn't. This one I did not want to go look at all of your stuff, and that's not to be offensive to you. There's some of these like this that I like to come in, and on this one, when I do the intro, I'll explain to everybody that, I'm coming in on this one because I'm coming to your lecture. I'm a person that kind of knows what Lyme disease is and what it is that you're going to speak about, but I'm like the open mind. I want you to
Okay.
educate me and just throw everything you can, and you're on the show as long as you want to be here. Like I said, there's no time limit. um I want you to be comfortable, and we're never here to ambush or do anything to anybody. This is your time to talk about what it is you do, and some of the standard questions are also on a list of talking points here, but if there's something that Elmer or I think of that you're throwing out or whatever, we might throw something at you. But you're our guest, you're our friend. We are. I know other podcasts say that, and then I watch them, and then they're like ambushing people, And I don't operate like that. This show is to be very friendly.
Well,
Um,
mostly, I think I make people speechless because they can't believe the stuff that I've
the
learned. So,
stuff, the stuff that the stuff you're going
yeah,
to share. Well, I can
I
hardly
know.
wait.
Um,
Okay, we'll get started here with our intro.
mhm.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And welcome everybody to this special edition of I Want to Believe Radio. I'm Dan Holroyd, and with me as always, Elmer Boster. Hey, Elmer.
Hey, buddy, what you up to?
Oh, I was fishing earlier. Well, you were out working hard in the field.
Yeah,
You know.
we already established that. After a 12-hour
Yeah,
shift, you're over there
right,
fishing. I work 12
right.
hours. You work 12 hours fishing.
I wish I had 12 hours of fishing. But welcome everybody to the program. We've got a special guest with us. KRIS NEWBY is with us on this episode, and I'm going to read her information here. KRIS NEWBY joins us, obviously, to uncover the mystery surrounding one of the most controversial and misdiagnosed. Man, I am drinking some whiskey, and that is even hard to say when you're sober. Um,
Wait a minute, you
misdiagnosed
sober?
conditions of our time. It's Lyme disease, revealing the man behind a secret role in developing bug-borne biological weapons, raising terrifying questions about the genesis of the epidemic of tick-borne diseases affecting millions of Americans today. KRIS, welcome to the show. And as I told you before we got started, I'll tell the audience, Elmer's done a little research. I wanted to come into this one as a kind of a fresh fish. See what I did there? On this one, because I wanted to pretend as if I'm coming into a lecture. I'm not quite sure what this is about, but I'm interested, and I'm just going to let you roll with this, like who you are, how you got interested in this, and where this rabbit hole just runs from here.
Sure. Yeah. So I was probably like most people listening. I could care less about ticks. Then in 2002, my husband and I and our two boys in middle school went to Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts on a vacation, had a great time on the beach. And then we went home to our home in California. And then my husband and I got sick. And within the course of a week, we were sicker than we'd ever been before. And we went to the doctor and they said, well, it's just a summer flu. Go home, it'll fix itself. And it didn't. And so that started a nightmare journey into the abyss of an unknown disease for both my husband and I. Luckily, our kids didn't get it. But my husband and I, we spent a year, 10 doctors, and $60,000. By the end of that year, we were completely debilitated. I couldn't work anymore, but my husband drug his butt to work every day just so we had health insurance to see doctors to figure out what was wrong with us. every doctor I saw, I mean, I'm a science writer. I'm an engineer by training, a science writer by profession. And every doctor I saw, I had a timeline of our symptoms. We had these symptoms by the time we were 6 months into it. It was like having Alzheimer's and arthritis with sore joints and irritable bowel syndrome, where we didn't want to eat because our gut hurt so much, and headaches and muscle aches and neurological twitches. And my husband was so weak, he couldn't pick up a Makita drill. He uses it at work every day. So anyways, long story short, we finally went to the big Ivory Tower Medical Institution, and every doctor I saw, I said, I think it might be Lyme disease. And they said, no, it's not Lyme disease. That's a really rare disease, and it would be almost impossible for both of you to get it on the same day and be sick for a whole year. Okay, so we went to this big medical institution, and they tested us for 10, 15 diseases. And finally, that doctor there, he's an infectious diseases specialist, tested us for Lyme disease, and I came up positive. I was super excited.
I'm still shocked by the $60,000 price tag. I let you talk a little bit more because I didn't want to really interrupt you, but I almost spit my drink out. I mean, that's insane. And describing your sickness, I can only imagine the panic, let alone the financial burden. But go ahead and continue. Yeah, man.
Well, I'll just get into what happens. We were in our early 40s, and you have 2 little kids, and in California, it's super expensive. Our lifestyle was geared around 2 incomes, and all of a sudden I can't work. And my husband, it seems like one day he's at work, he's giving a presentation, and all of a sudden he can't remember where he is, what he's talking about, or who he is.
Oh no.
So it's serious neurological issues. And anyways, we were excited when I finally got a positive test for Lyme disease. And then those doctors at the Ivory Tower said, well, this is a bad test, even though it's positive, even though it was the first test that was positive for this whole year. He says, that's a bad test, so just ignore it. And we don't treat people like you here, implying that we were nuts. Like one infectious disease doctor told us I had a psychosomatic couples thing where I was sick and I was a hypochondriac and my husband was having empathy pains. So anyways.
Oh my God. How do they, that blows my mind, Chris. It's like, how in the world can you, enlighten me and everybody, how is it that they misdiagnose this like that, or they just blow this over? Because now you've got me thinking, I'll tell you why later in the program, because I think I've had something going on, but how do they blow this?
Well, I'm a curious person, and that's what really drove me to do once the Ivory Tower doctors fired us as patients and they wouldn't give us a referral, then we went on the internet.
Crazy.
Dr. Google.
Oh my God.
And we found there's this whole network of Lyme disease patients that have been spit out of the system. And because it's been so traumatic for them, they are online and they help other people. So
sure.
Some person in the middle of the night, you're so sick, you have insomnia, said, hey, I said my symptoms, it sounds exactly like Lyme disease. Plus you got a positive test. Hardly anybody tests positive on the test because the tests for Lyme disease are bad. In the first month, they just don't work in the first month. It worked for me because I'd had it for almost a year. So then we found an internet doctor in our town of Palo Alto, and she started treating us and gave us antibiotics. And then we started on our slow path to recovery. And it was after a year of being sick every day. But I might want to back up and say what Lyme disease is.
Yes. Yeah. Explain to us, what is it exactly?
Yeah. So Lyme disease is a little bacterium. It's shaped like a corkscrew. It's sort of long and snaky compared to most bacteria. It is transmitted by the bite of a tick. A tick crawls up, finds a nice damp, dark place where you can't find them, drills into your skin, and starts sucking your blood. And as it's sucking in your blood, whatever it's in its gut is emptied into your tissue and bloodstream. And that can be Lyme disease. It can be 20 other germs that can make you sick.
Right. What's the percentage of people who, get bit by ticks that actually get this? Is it high, low, mid-range?
It's really, really regional. It depends on the dampness and the state that you're in. You can go to the CDC site and see where most of the Lyme disease is. And
I would probably trust your research before I would CDC. I'm just throwing that out there to people, but because you have a personal involvement in this, so I'm sure that you have crossed the T's and dotted the I's. And please forgive me if I jump around a little bit because my wheels are always going, Chris, and I'm just like, I got to throw things out once they're in there, otherwise I forget. But I find that just strange still. You're saying the ivory tower doctors, and I've dealt with that too. That is a thing that exists in the medical field with a lot of things, but with the Lyme disease, I mean, this is right up there. It's serious. It's very serious. I'm just shocked. So once you get this, I mean, how do you combat this?
Well, everyone agrees, almost everyone agrees, if you get it in the first month, and if you find out you have it and you're treated with antibiotics, you can get rid of it and move on with your life.
Okay.
When things are complicated is when it goes on and on, like it did with my husband.
Right.
And it becomes really entrenched in your tissue and in places that are protected from your immune system, like your brain and your joints. And then it can go, you can have really long haul symptoms, and it's harder to get rid of. It's especially complicated if you get more than one type of germ. So there are rickettsias like Rocky Mountain spotted fever, babesia, which is like a malaria-like parasite. So you can get viruses, and so it's a germ pylon, and you can get really, really sick. And sometimes you can die in 14 days, and they may never know what it is. And the testing, these diseases are really underfunded, and the testing is still not good. And so it's a huge unrecognized problem. And so the cosmic question is why? And that's why I've been in this for 17 years. And I don't have a perfect answer, but I can tell you some things that I think are contributing. And one thing is the use of ticks in biological weapons during the Cold War, which is shocking, and I didn't believe it at first.
How do I want to put this? I won't say I'm shocked. I'm a little surprised, but I'm not really shocked. I mean, we know military's been doing a lot of things, with that type of stuff, but to hear that it's going on with, this type of thing, and then adversely, it can impact us, right here at home. What in the world? So what is it that you discovered in that research?
Well, the first thing I did was I got the disease in 2002, and 2003 I started doing a documentary with this really talented filmmaker, Andy Abrahams Wilson, and we spent about 5 years working together doing this documentary, which you can watch on Amazon Prime for free. It's called Under Our Skin. And that's a really good intro to what is Lyme disease and why is this disease so controversial. And when we started, Andy and I gave each other nicknames, Mulder and Scully. I'm like the blonde doctor doubting, and Andy loves the paranormal, and he totally said, well, let's go start investigating the biological weapons. I said, no, the disease already has a credibility problem, and that's just a wild conspiracy theory. But later I came around.
Much to your shock. Yeah, I can only imagine.
I know. So we did this film, and what I focused on is the money aspects, follow the money. So there is very little money going in from the government going into Lyme research. So there's sort of a scrappy, competitive hyenas going after a dead zebra competition to get very little research money. So those researchers are pretty competitive and brutal if anybody has any ideas other than the ones that they had when Lyme was discovered in 82. So they're defending their science, which is, to me, it's outdated and it was wrong from the beginning. And part of that might be the biological weapons, which I'll get to later. So it's this group of people that started researching Lyme in 82 when it was discovered. They patented test kits and vaccines. And then this is a dangerous new germ. And rather than sharing that information, it became intellectual property and they kept it under wraps. So science didn't do what it did in COVID, where all the scientists decided this is a bad enough epidemic that we're going to share information. They didn't. They hoarded the information.
Right.
So I think the science got off on a bad foot because of the money stuff.
Well, it seems like across the board with a lot of different things, that seems to be the norm. It really does. You know, I've got a friend who's an engineer and scientist. He's in my group and he speaks very openly, you know, within his own, you know, circles here in West Michigan, that even that science community about certain things, you know, like you said, there's money seems to be the obvious common denominator. Whether or not you're going to think outside the box or really put any time or effort in anything, because they become settled on their own, making pretty much their own cult and their own little religion. But you know, the dollar is the high end drive, and I'm glad that you're speaking about that. And I still am just still fascinated by the fact that that type of stuff goes on, and it goes on enough to where, you know, you've seen it, you researched it, you found it, and some of us out here can see it at times, but just seems like it goes on unvetted and nobody watches, you know, at least the people that should care. Does that make sense?
And it was also money because late stage Lyme was really expensive to treat. You have to do intravenous antibiotics that at the time I was treated, that could be like $60,000 a year. So
jeez, oh Pete.
There was a lot of incentives for insurance companies to say chronic Lyme doesn't exist. And so the academics were saying, oh, you can cure Lyme disease in 2 to 6 weeks of doxycycline. That's a really cheap antibiotic. But what the CDC announced, I think 2 years ago, is 10 to 20% of people who are treated with that don't get better. And there can be a lot of reasons for that. It's their immune system, or it could be they have co-infections. Or it could be that a lot of Lyme specialists believe you need to treat with multiple antibiotics. You need to make sure there are no co-infections there. And you need to treat for a lot longer for some people.
I got an interesting question for you, because you just made me think of something. Now, was that the threat back in, you know, Native American time before we got here? Is there something that we have done as a modern mechanized society that has caused this now to be this huge thing? Because how did the Native Americans live with this and treat this if they got it? Because you see what I'm asking? So whatever the seriousness is with it now, was that in existence from day one, or do you think that there's something involved there too?
So after I finished the film, which was a 5-year process, it actually was an Oscar semifinalist in 2010. It was exhausting, and I was sick. I was recovering while
you're doing it.
I was doing the film. I said, I'm done. I'll let other people do the torch. It's been a great ride. I'm really glad the film helps so many people, but I wasn't going to do anything else. Then I had this crazy thing happen. I was at a family party on my in-laws side, and there were a lot of strangers there. I sat down at the kitchen table with a few other people, and there's this grizzly old guy sitting at the table, and he's like in the movie Jaws, the old captain who was a survivor on the Indiana. And he was into his cups. And so I'm just this perky blonde mom, and I go, oh, what did you do when you worked? And he goes, I was CIA Black Ops. And he started telling Apocalypse Now kind of stories for about 20 minutes.
Right.
And at the end of it, and he has no idea who I am or what I just had done. And he says, well, the strangest thing I ever did was I dropped 2 boxes of ticks on Cuban sugar workers after the Bay of Pigs fiasco. So it's like, what? And my husband and I look at each other with wide eyes. It's like, of all the gin joints in all the world, how did I end up at this table with really the first person to ever admit that we dropped poison ticks on foreign soil.
I like you, Chris. I love that reference. I don't know if a lot of people are going to get that. I got it. I got that reference.
Casablanca, all the
yes,
yeah.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Classic. Yeah, that's insane.
That's the start of the book. And
man,
so
go ahead. You're blowing my mind.
I know. So that evening, I kept on trying to pull information out of him, not telling him who I was. And I would run into the bathroom. I'd like jot down notes. And I knew nothing about the Cold War, and he fired out words that I'd never heard before. Operation Mongoose, Colonel Lansdale, the Cuba Project.
Right.
And then I tucked it in my file and I wasn't going to do anything. And then I had another sort of radical documentary friend from Michigan, Tim.
Oh, yay.
Tim, Traverse City. He's from Traverse City. So Tim Gray, and he had done a bioweapons Lyme documentary that was a little bit out there, so it didn't get a lot of pickup. It's called Under the Eight Ball. And he called me and says, "Hey, I just went to see the discoverer of Lyme disease, Willie, in Montana." And he said that he thought the outbreak of Lyme disease in I guess the outbreak, he investigated it in the middle 70s. And he said, he thinks it's a bioweapon. I go, no. And he goes, yes. But because I talked to this grisly Black Ops CIA guy, I was sort of like, well, I have 2 data points. And can I really walk away from this? I mean, because if it really happened, if there really was a biological weapons release in the 2 places where it started, which is, northern Wisconsin and Lyme, Connecticut, then somebody's got to look into this. Somebody's got to expose it. It's a crime against humanity. And getting this into the sunlight will save lives.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And it begs the huge question, still, I'm a guy that I won't go into too detail with folks out here on this show. Okay. But no people involved in the military, support all that kind of stuff. But I don't want to get hate mail over this, but it's one thing, even though it's wrong. Okay. Biological weapons are wrong. Everybody hear me that on the program. That's wrong. I don't believe in it. It's wrong. But I guess I'm trying to make a point, and I'm very apprehensive how I want to put this. So it's one thing to use this on the enemy. I'll just say it. And then how does this escape and end up happening here? Now, were things released here, or was there a backlash and somehow they've traveled? I mean, what's the answer to that question? How does this break loose here and start happening here? Was it on purpose?
Well, it's just so Willy Bergdorfer, the discoverer of Lyme disease, when I went out to see him after getting this information to verify some things, he said, "Hey, I'm the hero, the discoverer of Lyme disease, but I was involved in the biological weapons program for 2 decades." And so you have to look at it as a pipeline, like a drug discovery pipeline. Right. Willie was the guy who was a consultant to Fort Detrick. That's the head of the biological weapons program in Maryland. And they did chemical weapons like Agent Orange and biological weapons like this weaponization of fleas, ticks, and mosquitoes that I'm going to tell you about. And that program, chemical and bio, was almost as big and as secretive as the Manhattan Project. Lord. And that organization also had a little CIA unit buried in it, and they were the people who did the LSD experiments, the Manchurian candidate, mind control. So they had military objectives. The people who mostly ran the program were Army. They're really organized. So let's say you want to develop a biological weapons. There's all these steps you have to do. The first thing is, let's just use the 50s sort of strategy, which is putting germs in bugs. Later on, they just took the germs and grew them in mass quantities like beer. They'd brew them, powderize them and spray them. But you want to say, okay, we need to think up a germ that we can drop on the enemy that won't rouse suspicions. Like there was an alleged biological weapons program by us in Korea, and they put thrips and lice and spiders on the snow in winter. And it's like, then there was a lot of bad PR backlash. No. So in the 50s, they became wiser and they said, let's do bugs that won't stand out if we drop it on Russia. So Willie's job would be to mix and match germs, insects.
Right.
So, and, you know, in the normal Darwinian evolutionary world, and I think about when I was a kid and I was spent a lot of time in the creek in the woods in the 60s, we never got sick. But something happened in the 70s where people really, really got sick. And so something changed. And so that's really what I was looking at, is what changed and it led to this biological weapons thing. But okay, so there's this pipeline. Willie tests it. He says, okay, this germ will live inside of this tick. Then he would send it back to Fort Detrick. Fort Detrick would do, they were getting orders from the Pentagon. You know, we want something to drop on Korea. We want something to drop in Vietnam. We want something to drop in Siberia, on Moscow or Siberia or whatever. So then they would do small pilot studies in a controlled environment in Maryland. Then they'd want to really do bigger field studies, and that would be in the godforsaken middle of the desert in Utah. And that's Dugway Proving Grounds. And that would be open air. They thought it wouldn't affect the general population around Salt Lake and whatever, so they just do that. Or they do tests in Canada with our partners up there. And then they would deploy it. So what Willie said is accidents happen. He didn't say exact, you know, he took a secrecy oath. Serious, he said they would deport me if I told you all the details, but he implied that there was one of these experiments, one of the open air experiments. They would test live organisms in different humidities and altitudes and temperatures and to see if it would work. And he said an accident happened. So a lot of what I did with the book was I went back into old newspapers, archives. Willie posted some of his old lab notebooks, and I really pieced together the secret history of Lyme disease, which is the subtitle, and found some interesting things that I present in the book.
And I would like to remind the audience listening to this episode, folks, you know, she's very correct in the information she received from this individual, that when you are working on certain programs, even if you go to work, ThinkPack, okay, and you're in communications and you're getting all these coded things and uncoded things that go by you, when you leave the military, you go through a debriefing. If you don't believe me, you can look this up. It's common knowledge. So he's very accurate, you know. And there's more threats than just deporting you. There's a lot of different threats that come along with that. That's something that we were told when we took our oath, you know, going into when I went to join the Navy. You know, there's certain things they'll tell you up front. And I've had friends who've come out who've worked in special programs. I have a friend who worked in military intelligence, and he can talk about a lot, Chris, you know, and you're correct. And then there's a lot he can't. And he said there's a lot of times there are things that bothers his conscience, because there are things that he would love to, you know, put out in the open and talk about, but, you know, I'll disappear. It's one of these things that he says to me. Now, as frightening that is to hear about our own system, our own government, it happens. But, you know, this Cold War thing, you'd almost want to say, well, wow, that's ingenious. But at the same time, how freaking frightening is this? You know, like you said, people just got so sick in certain areas. Accidents happen. And I think the insanity of mankind, and I'd love to hear you shout back at this, is, you know, we try to do these things and we think, oh, well, we can control this. Everything's fine. We're going to be fine. It's all fine. And it's not. And I just still find that just how insane people are. You know, what's that saying? You probably know it better than me, Chris, because you're a science writer. You know, these people go wrapped up in whether or not they can do something. They don't stop to think whether or not they should do it or have done it.
That's that great quote from Jurassic Park from the chaos theory scientist in Malcolm. Yeah. It's like, just because you can do it, should you?
Yeah, it's true. It's very true.
Yeah. And so I think Willy Burgdorfer, he didn't tell the whole truth, and he gave us information in a subversive way. but he knew what was at stake because he arrived from Switzerland to work for the biological weapons program in 52. At that time, Frank Olson was head of the biological weapons program, and he's the guy where the CIA allegedly dosed him with LSD and then pushed him out of the Statler Hotel because Frank Albarelli wrote a great book about what he thinks happened to Frank Olson. It's called A Terrible Mistake. And what he said happened is Frank Olson was involved in using LSD in a whole town in France. And he had a crisis of conscience. He started talking to some people about it. And at that time, Dietrich had sentries all over the place, and they would test the employees to make sure they wouldn't spill the beans. And so Frank Albarelli believed that they silenced him because they were worried that Frank would talk about this.
And I believe that, Chris. I do.
Experiment on the French.
Yeah, I believe that wholeheartedly. I believe he was murdered. I've seen several documentaries that include his story, and it's like, hey, it's right there for everybody to see, guys. Come on,
Yeah, so Willie saw that. He knew what was at stake.
Yeah.
Frightening. What he ended up doing, and so I had two people. I had the CIA guy and Willie say biological weapons were involved, but as a journalist, I needed backup. You can't just take the word of one person because they could have an agenda, they could want attention, et cetera.
Absolutely.
So with the CIA guy, I finally got the confirmation because it came with the in 2017 and 2018 the JFK assassination files, which was all tied up with the Cuban underworld and black ops, and so they all of a sudden had documentation of the Mongoose Project, where the goal was total economic warfare in Cuba so that you could destroy the economy and the people would rise up and kick out the Fidel Castro. And so the tick thing was a pilot that didn't work, but there were many other ways that they wanted to kill Castro. They wanted to spray horrible fungus in his wetsuit because he loved to go diving. They wanted to put a bomb inside a conch shell and put it on the bottom of the ocean where he usually went looking for, scuba diving, and so it would blow up and kill him.
Yeah, everybody thinks this stuff is just TV science fiction stuff, and I think they'd be more shocked and surprised at some of the real weapons. I've watched several documentaries. I'm a guy who gets on Gaia a lot. I listen to George and I listened to Art Bell for years, and a lot of people like yourself and other people who are tattletaling on a lot of these things without having an agenda. They know it's the right thing to do, and there have been people, like you said, who have talked about these crazy kind of things that are going on. I mean, like I said, when I said you were blowing my mind, you literally are just, you're opening a whole nother section. And I don't consider this conspiracy theory at all. I believe this to be very real. I think that you've touched on something. And who am I? But I'm just saying, everything you're saying makes sense, and you've obviously got information from people who have been there, done this. So keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. I just love what you're sharing. It's important.
Yeah, and so I tried really hard to get documentation on all this, and in Bitten, I knew this was a huge hurdle for a lot of people, so I made sure I said exactly this is what the facts are. This is how it fit into the overall strategy of the Pentagon. Why did they stuff plague and fleas or Trinidad agent inside of mosquitoes or horrible diseases like spotted fever inside of ticks? Well, it's the perfect stealth weapon. You'd spray it. There's no fingerprints on a mosquito or a tick. You spray it months before your attack. It weakens the general population. And then when your boots on the ground go in, it's easier to take over.
Oh, absolutely. Everybody's sick. Yeah, they're sick to death.
Yeah,
literally.
And they had two forms of biological weapons. There was fatal, which they found out is bad PR in the world.
Yep.
It violates the Geneva Convention. Or there's incapacitating agents. So a lot of times they would do that, and they would mix a virus with a bacteria, and it would create a really confusing set of symptoms that you couldn't test for, and that was part of their strategy.
Right.
But
right.
what I did was I said, well, there's something that was really convenient about Willie saying, oh, all these people started getting sick in the late 60s, actually around Lyme, Connecticut. So Long Island, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Connecticut. So I went back to old newspapers, old archives, and looking for animal die-offs, because that's a lot of times that's a sign that there's an unnatural germ being spread.
Right.
For example, there was
like deer populations and other animals. Yeah, right.
Yeah, or
birds.
The duck farms in Long Island were devastated around then.
Oh man!
Like, what caused that?
Right.
Then you have newspaper reports, and you don't really know, are they telling the truth, or is this part of the cover-up? But the thing I found out
is the news telling the truth. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, back then, yeah. I mean, it's also the state of mind. Back then, the commie threat was as urgent as the 9/11 threat.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
all of a sudden, the ends justified the means, and morals went out the window because we felt the threat was so imminent. So you have to, part of what I do is put it in the context of how people were thinking then and why they did these things, which seem completely outrageous. But to go back to the history, what I found that was unusual, late 60s, 3 new freaky tick-borne germs appeared in that area in the Northeast, and they were killing people. And I believe there were silent alarms being raised in the CDC, which really was invented as an organization to look for unnatural bioweapons attacks. Originally when it was formed.
Originally, yeah.
Yeah. Now it's morphed into, make sure people don't wear diapers in swimming pools, but they still perform that other
function. Right. Speak your mind here, Chris. This is an open forum. You say what you want to say. Yeah, I'm not a fan. And the hearing that there are things that were not only produced there, then moved to other places, and other things have happened, that's kind of broke loose with people like you who've come out and started speaking about other programs. You're just like, there's a connection. There's this horrible connection with all this stuff. It's just frightening.
Right. So let me talk about the germs that appeared late 60s. You have this crazy Lyme arthritis. People's knees would blow up like balloons, mostly kids. You had spotted fever. Rocky Mountain spotted fever is like the most deadly tick-borne disease in the U.S. It was it was on the short list for really great bioweapons then. And all of a sudden, people in Long Island started getting sick with spotted fever and dying. And before, there was like 1 or 2 cases a year. And then the other thing is babesia, which is this malaria cattle parasite. And in the late 60s, it showed up. It was the first time that babesia showed up in humans on the east of the Mississippi. And it was like the 5th case in the US. So unusual that this parasite would cross over to man. So then that starts, digging in the National Archives, Willie's old papers, and just really trying to do a timeline on what the military program was doing. And what Willie said was he was told to blame all the illness on this Lyme spirochete. But he said there were other organisms that they were told to cover up. And one of them was a spotted fever-like tiny little bacteria. And he nicknamed it Swiss agent. And he's Swiss. So
yeah.
So that was what I sort of had to learn microbiology from scratch, even though I'm an engineer, but I didn't know anything about that, just to read his lab notebooks. And
it's understandable because it's a personal interest of you. I mean, serious things were happening and you wanted answers.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally understandable.
Yeah. So I believe
God bless you.
He never said it directly. He just said accidents happen. I was told for the Discovery article, I was to get pictures that did not show this spotted fever organism in them for the Discovery article in Science Magazine. And then I got early drafts of his Science Magazine article that showed he mentioned we think that this Lyme bacteria is what's causing the illness, but we really should explore this other organism that's unidentified that I found. Which he told the Michigan filmmaker, it looked like something we worked on in the 50s as a weapon.
Yeah, yeah. And I wonder how many, I mean, maybe you have an answer to this. How many genetic scientists who are on the right side of this are there, or are there any that are involved and who are looking into this too? And obviously trace, you can follow this backwards and say, well, this isn't a natural progression, obviously, as you've already said and indicated. I mean, are there people alongside you in that, in that field that are also getting involved at this point and just trying to show everybody, like, look, this doesn't naturally happen in the world? I think that went back to my first question, is like, well, then it would have happened way back in the day and it would always be here. I mean, are there strains that can just stump up on their own, create their own genetics? I doubt it.
Yeah, the odds that 3 brand new tick-borne diseases, all that are really disease-causing, virulent, show up in that same, 4-year period, very rare.
Right.
And, by blaming the Lyme spirochete for all the illness, it was a good way that no one would look into this other thing. It's so small and you need a special stain to see it. So with conventional microscopes, you can't see it. Right. But right now, the people in the inner circle, I mean, I believe there are some people that still know, are probably shaking in their boots, because now we have genetic sequencing. It's like when you sign up for 23andMe, I can tell exactly where my ancestors came from Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago. And we can tell what flask, if they know this exists, a geneticist can tell which flask this organism came from in what lab.
Right. I mean, that's almost mirroring what's going on right now. That's a whole other show. We won't get into the whole craziness of that. But to me, it's virtually the same thing. You can backtrack. I guess that's what I was saying. I'm this, again, my wheels go. I'm this layman guy. You're obviously 10 times more intelligent than I am. You've studied, you've gone to lengths in college to do things that I haven't. I've got a degree, but what were you going to do with the bachelor's of arts? You know what I did with it? Nothing. I ended up going into law enforcement, corporate security. So there's my life story, everybody. Let's take a quick break. I want to cover some more stuff with KRIS NEWBY here. And I've been calling you by your first name. I hope that's okay. I try to be as familiar as I can with my guests on the program. Everybody, you're listening to I Want to Believe Radio right here on the one and only unrestrictedradio.com here Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you're just coming over to the webpage, do yourself a favor and download the app. It's free. There are a lot of great programs on here. It's music and bands that other local stations and other internet stations won't play and don't know about, and we are exclusive. It's modeled and started right here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We would love to have you on board as a listener. Also, one of our sponsors, Henderson Castle. That's in here in downtown Kalamazoo, hendersoncastle.com, an 1895 bed and breakfast built by Frank and Mary Henderson. Yours truly hosts historic ghost tours. You all know I'm a paranormal investigator. I've been doing that for quite a few years. You can come there and get a great dinner from Francois Moyer. He has cooked for Princess Diana, President Bush, and I'm lucky to call him a brother. We have him right here in Kalamazoo. It's a great time. And also Gun Barrel Coffee. Those of you watching the video, if you see, my friends, you see I always wear my gun barrel hat. You've had the rest, drink the breast. The breast. You can drink the breast. Okay, I've had way too much scotch, everybody. You can drink the best. Please forgive the faux pas. Gun Barrel Coffee, gunbarrelcoffee.com. It is run by veterans, roasted by veterans, and proceeds go to help veteran organizations. All right, I've blown out enough hot air. Everybody take a listen to some of the PSAs and the great music we have for you. We'll be back for more right after this. Give a little bit of a pause here to pretend like we're taking a break. Okay, and we are back. I want to believe radio. And I've got a great guest. KRIS NEWBY is blowing my mind, literally. I'm into a lot of different things because I am very aware that government, military, and a lot of other things attached have been doing things for many, many years. She is here talking to us about Lyme disease and some other things that are connected to this. And I find her to be very intelligent, which I want that to be a compliment. It's not like you would see a really pretty blonde who comes on the program, KRIS, and I'd be like, oh, here we go. I please don't take it that way. You are very intelligent, and you've given a lot of great information, and you've been very patient with my interruptions. Let's lead off to where we kind of left off. You were talking, about this being used as biological weapons and all these other things, and continue. I know I interrupted you to take a break.
Yeah. So I remained open-minded on what happened that would cause this big outbreak of tick-borne diseases around the late 60s, which really blossomed and it was on the top of everyone's mind in the 70s and then finally discovered in the 80s. But the discovery of Lyme disease said accidents happen, and so I started investigating the accidents. And I'll just tell you some of the craziest stories I learned as I researched biological weapons. And as you hear these say, my conclusion was the chances that there would be an accident is greater than them not, when you have all these military people involved and scientists and dangerous germs, because nature finds a way. Just like with the Wuhan virus.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yep. You can have a virus in a lab and sometimes it can get out. Viruses are wily creatures. They've been on the planet longer than us. So I'll just tell you the craziest stories. The one was an experiment for the military, for the Army and the Atomic Energy Commission that was hiding in plain sight in obscure medical journals. So there's this famous tick researcher from Old Dominion University. He got this Army money to find out if you release a bunch of ticks in a field, how far will they travel in a month or 6 months or a year?
Yeah, like a migration, right.
Right. So he took various species of ticks, but one of them are Lone Star ticks. They're these ticks with a big white dot on their back. And they're particularly aggressive, man-biting, and they're the only U.S. tick that has rudimentary eye buds on their shoulders, so they can see and stalk their prey. Like Fort Bullis in Texas once recorded 4,000 ticks swarmed on a soldier's leg in an hour.
What?
They don't. Yeah.
Who's the guy that signs up for that experiment? Anybody?
I know.
I'm not doing that. There's not enough money.
Also, they're particularly hardy. So if you're looking for a tick you want to drop on the Russians, it's a good choice.
Cool.
Willie said that those kind of ticks, you could put it in a freezer for a year and it survived. There's no documents on that. But there was a study where they put Lone Stars underwater for 70 days and they lived. So anyways,
what in the world?
This scientist released hundreds of thousands of these Lone Star ticks in a couple fields that were marked off in grids. And in each square, he would release 1,000 ticks. And then he would, every month or week or whatever, he'd go and like collect the ticks in each square. And then the way he would tell how far they'd gone is he made those ticks that he released radioactive. He injected a pregnant tick with radioactive fluid, and then that mama tick would have 2,000 to 3,000 baby ticks come out, and then he would release those ticks. And so he could tell, he did these experiments over about 4 years, how far the ticks would go, because he would collect them and he'd use a Geiger counter to tell, how far they'd gone. But it was totally, and then he would take those ticks and put them back in the square where he got them. So how many things can you think of that's wrong about that experiment? First of all, these ticks were
there's a lot that can go wrong there. Yeah.
Aggressive ticks, non-native, they hadn't been in this area before. And he did these experiments on the Atlantic bird flyway. And he also did experiments that proved that a bird that landed in his field could take that tick to Long Island in 5 days.
Yeah.
And right after those experiments, they found the first Lone Star ticks on Long Island, and that's when the spotted fever epidemic started, in the early 70s, and that's when people were dying of spotted fever, because that is the only tick that carried that disease in that area. So then these guys are like these are like the stormtrooper scientists.
I don't know if anybody gets that reference. It's like, we're fine. It's all fine here. Everything's under control. Good Lord, you're scaring me to death. I mean, because I'm aware of other things out there like this too. And it's just, Jesus, to think that you have anything in a controlled environment is just ridiculous to begin with. I'm sorry. I just had to say that out loud. Otherwise, I was going to go to bed tonight and be grumpy. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Chris.
So then the other thing that's wrong with that experiment is you made these ticks radioactive for life. And who doesn't know that if you make something radioactive, there are going to be mutations, probably.
Yep.
And so one of the really nasty things about these aggressive Lone Star ticks is their saliva can transmit in certain people an allergy to red meat. So some people who've been bitten by these ticks have this delayed reaction red meat allergy that lasts for years and years. And they can eat a really nice burger and then about 5 or 6 hours later, vomit, maybe have anaphylactic shock, feel horrible. And so that's like a really big epidemic that's happening, on that bird flyway. Those ticks were released.
I'm just going to throw this out there. Do you think that this tick thing could be connected to connective tissue disorders?
Yes. Yes.
Interesting, because that's what I suffer from. That's why I alluded to you earlier. We had the question of tick bite had come up, and not that we ever really found one, because I don't think that everybody suffers the traditional marks when you get the tick bite, or it could be in places where you don't see it for the longest time. Now, I'm bald, so it wouldn't be hidden too much on my head. Where I'm going with that question for you is, and thanks for answering that very honestly, is that I've had symptoms that you talked about, and still to this day, when you talked about your husband's memory, I had a symptom of basically like I was going to pass out, I guess, if you will. And I used to have a photographic memory. And Chris, I tell you, I struggle still to this day. And we're 5 years, 6 years now into when this originally started. And it's been a journey to try to identify what's wrong, because I have a connective tissue disorder. That's at least what my doctors come to surmise. And tell me if any of this makes any sense with your husband's situation. I got leg tremors, hand tremors, a lot of different things that would come and go. I'm not having as many dizzy spells and things to this day, but I still suffer from a lot of arthritis pain, more than usual. Neuropathy and other things set in that just I shouldn't have, but I have it. And the neurological, like you said, the neurological damage with my memory, it's frightening, because I used to just look at something and recall it. It'd be there. I have great days still, and I have bad days. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Those symptoms could be Lyme disease or any number of other diseases. And you're a fisherman. You're on the water's edge with swishy grasses where ticks hang out. And absolutely, you could have been bitten by a tick and you may not have known it.
Yeah.
There's various studies that say 30 to 50% of the people never see the tick.
Yeah, I'm outdoors and in the woods quite a bit, even back then. So
I'll give you the PSA advice on what to do if you think you have Lyme disease. So
yes, ma'am.
Go to lymedisease.org on the website, and they have a really great checklist on symptoms. And at least you can see if it matches Lyme disease or any other diseases. You can look at a map and see where the various diseases are. Like where you are, it could be Lyme disease. It could be this spotted fever-like organism called anaplasma or HGE. I'm not going to tell you the technical name. But anyways, go to lymedisease.org, look at the symptom list, and then you can find a doctor in your area. And I know you have some good ones in Michigan and Wisconsin.
Yeah, I've got a good one who, like I said, we're still looking into that. There's a possibility. He's been the first doctor that really listened, and I've been very happy with Eric. And I tell you, he's put a lot of things in order and in perspective, but I'm still suffering from this weird like your husband, like this weird stuff. I'll have good days and bad days, and I'm having more good days, 6 years into this, but that's how long it took to reach a point where, not using medications, but just, fighting through it and getting a little better as we go. And my digestive system is out of whack.
Oh yeah.
Not so much with meat, but still things happen and I don't digest 100%. I didn't mean to make this about me. It's just that you're talking about a lot of things that really struck a chord with me emotionally. And I just thought, geez, now you really got me wondering, but go ahead and continue.
That's the one reason I love going on podcasts, is because it's not just about the biological weapons. You can say, oh, Chris, you don't have enough evidence or whatever, but at least I'm telling people a lot of this information about, one of the reasons I did the film is the symptoms that people are experiencing are different than what's on the CDC website. CDC, right. As we found out with the coronavirus, there's a certain lag from when really accurate information comes from the clinician's office to medical journals to the CDC. It's like, in the case of Lyme disease, it's about
had it right yet,
30
Chris.
years.
You're preach it, girl. They haven't had it right yet with this. So you are correct. Right.
And a lot of times what I talk about is, first of all, there's some incredible scientists at the CDC and some of them are friends, but the system is broken there. And it's been about 50 years since these biological weapons happen. And anyone who's had long haul Lyme knows that the CDC has goofed up on so many ways, endorsing bad tests, bad symptom lists, which means people go undiagnosed and they go on to be sick for the rest of their lives.
We have two friends who suffer from it. So again,
it breaks up their marriages.
Yep.
They lose their jobs. They lose their houses. They're living in a van by the river.
Yeah, I hate to laugh, but yes, it's funny, but it's not. But yes, we have two friends who went through that and divorce, and just as you laid it out, and it turns into this huge thing, And he's still not one of our friends. He's still not able to work and produce the way he wants to because he's still sick from that Lyme disease. It's just wow. Took him out. Yeah. God bless him. He's gotten help now, and he's got a good friend and partner now, but thanks for bringing that up. It's sad. It affects people in just horrible ways. Yeah, let alone if it's making children sick and killing children.
Yeah.
God.
And it's proven pregnant mothers can pass the Lyme spirochetes to their unborn children. There have been a few documented stillborns where the placenta or where the fetus is teeming with the bugs. So we need to do better. So recently I analyzed NIH, National Institutes of Health grants on Lyme disease, and only 1% of the total budget is being spent on Lyme disease treatments. And
why?
I don't know. I wish I knew.
That's why you're here. It's just why. Why, Chris?
No, we need to do better.
I don't understand, folks. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. The frustration and the anger. I'm sure you invoke this a lot with the people you talk to. I've got kids, they're grown, but I've got grandchildren, and screw worrying about me at this point. It's just like, this is about the generation and my grandkids and other people. Jesus Christ, forgive my swearing and my blasphemous language there, but golly. I don't know how you have the patience and the heart and the love to sit and be as calm as you do with this, but I think you have plenty of facts and information. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm outraged about this.
One point I want to make is, like, when you drop a nuke on a region, it's destroyed for hundreds to thousands of years with the radiation, like Chernobyl. And when these accidents happened, and I document a few more in the book, that has a lasting effect on the environment too. It puts nature out of balance. So if your family has been on Martha's Vineyard for hundreds of years and there was a certain number of microbes that had specialized and were in these ticks, chances are your family would be immune to them. You'd have an innate immunity to fight it off. But when they introduce all these new ones, and And they were releasing live bacteria, not necessarily, I don't have proof that they released Lyme disease, but they were releasing it in the New York subway system, in light bulbs, in the Pennsylvania Turnpike tunnels from the back of a truck via a sprayer, and they had sniffers in the tunnels. They had little boats spraying a bacteria around San Francisco Bay in the early 50s, and they thought that was a harmless bacteria, but it killed at least one person that we know of.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
I know of that story. Yep, I know of that story.
Yeah, so I go into that. So anyways, it's a lasting, they released in Georgia and Florida, in poor African American neighborhoods, they released the tick that spreads dengue and Zika, because they were without germs in it, but they released it through airplanes, and then they had military people posing as public health workers to ask people if they could collect these mosquito traps to see how far they would go, just like the tick experiments.
Right.
And, now we have populations of those mosquitoes that carry diseases they didn't normally.
Here. Yeah, we have them here. Right.
The point is, these kind of experiments kill animals and people too. Your pets, bunnies, mice, it's raccoons, it's birds. So we're still 50 years later suffering from the impacts of that. And as long as it's secret, and it's been really frustrating collecting these documents, it's going to cost lives.
Yeah, but God bless you doing it. God bless you for doing it. There's got to be people to stand up and have the voice. And I respect that. My wife would tell you, many people who know me through another program I do on here, I am very open and verbal about things like that. And, if we sit back here and we pretend like nothing's happened, and we don't, if we don't speak up and say something, we're just as guilty as the people who are out here conducting it, because we sat by and didn't do anything to bring the awareness or try to make a change. And I respect you a hell of a lot for being brave enough, because I can only imagine. I was going to ask you at some point here, in the show, if there's been any backlash or if you've had threats or anything come your way, because you're poking the bear, and they don't want you to poke the bear.
I know. So I've never felt in physical danger, but I've been warned by people in the intelligence community to watch my back. Watch your six.
That's a threat. That's a threat, KRIS. But yeah. I see what you're saying.
I guess so. But I've, like, when I went to Montana and they have the biolevel 4 lab there where I was questioning people, and I was watched. I knew who they were. Some of them. I didn't know all of them, but they were probing me.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing with these folks, is that they make themselves so obvious, it's almost laughable. Like you pull up on all these dark vehicles, or you're flying around my house with these unregistered helicopters. Yeah, I'm not going to notice anything. Nobody's going to notice, guys. That's the one part to me that's almost comical in the tragedy, is how obvious they can be. But you spoke about this infecting the environment as a whole, and folks, this literally throws that out of balance. I'm 58 years old, so I've been around a while. I remember middle to late 60s going into stuff. My cousins and aunts and uncles were doing the hippie thing and all about the environment. And, that's an important piece of the puzzle that you're bringing up, besides the human, impact. It's the environmental impact. So, guys, if things like this are going on with this, and it's throwing that out of balance, where do you think that leads eventually? Well, that leads to impacting us, and then it goes to greater extremes. And I think when the damage is done to a degree, I'm sure, KRIS, you could agree on this, that it's hard to come back from that if you can.
Yeah, and one reason to publish the book is hopefully we can learn from history. Florida's about to do an experiment with genetically modified mosquitoes. Why?
Yeah, why?
Why can't we do it in a controlled environment first? I worked with this amazing scientist at Stanford. I wrote about his discoveries. He's invented this $1 paper microscope that is amazing, and you can magnify stuff and do videos on your iPhone. It's called the Fold Scope. It's amazing. But he studied insects his whole life, and he was asked to go to Hawaii to talk about this genetically modified mosquito thing. And he says, it's a huge mistake. Why are they doing it? So,
yeah. I have a friend, Crystal Daly, and I'm sure she won't mind me bringing up her name. She lives in Traverse City area, and that's where she is. She's a bug scientist. I can't pronounce the name, but this is what she does, and she's always posting things and saying things, and she's noticed too, even with insect life in their area up there, there's been these weird changes and these weird anomalies, and not so much tick, but other varieties. And she's like, I wonder if this is caused by man-made things. It's like, well, obviously, I mean, if there's things like you said that are so drastic on genetic levels, I would obviously suspect human interference before I would any kind of, us happening naturally,
Yeah. So if there's one takeaway, is just take your tick check seriously after you've been fishing or whatever. Washing machines actually don't kill ticks necessarily. So put your clothes in the dryer if you're going to wear them again.
Yeah, it's the heat.
Get the ticks off. And and the other thing is my book. I mean, I feel like it was released right before the COVID thing, so it hasn't gotten as much attention as it could. But on some level, people believe after seeing what happened with COVID that government agencies can be wrong, and you need to be your own advocate for your your health. I mean,
yeah.
So that's really important. And then the other thing I would say is that when I released the book, a Republican from New Jersey, KRIS Smith, a congressman, was working on the DOD bill, and he pulled the book up and he said, you have to read this about the weaponization of ticks. We need to investigate this because we need the government to release this information because it'll save research dollars and save lives. So he tried to get into the DOD budget twice. It got booted out because in the last 2 years, there's been a lot going on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But
Chris, I tell everybody that we're all standing in the high grass watching the insane train go by, and we're kind of waving at the circus.
I know.
Go ahead. Sorry.
But I have heard on the QT that my book has inspired some scientists to all of a sudden start looking into ticks, like genetically sequencing everything in the gut of ticks, because maybe what's making people go on to be chronically ill is something other than the Lyme spirochete. It could be this mysterious Swiss agent USA that Willie alluded to. It could be viruses that were in those radioactive ticks that they didn't have genetic sequencing or high resolution microscopes then. This scientist could have released ticks that had diseases in them and he didn't know. And so that's it. Or it could be Plum Island. I mean, Michael Carroll wrote a really great book about all the anti-crop weapons that were developed on Plum Island, and they were mass producing ticks on Plum Island too. Did some of those get out?
Yeah.
We need more research.
Well, I was going to talk about how we've had these huge ramp ups. It comes and goes, and then we have years where there's a ramp up. They were saying this year in Michigan, we're going to have another bad year for ticks. Mm-hmm. And we're all saying, how could that be when we've had these horrible weather conditions and cold weather and what's happened here? And excuse me, I have a friend who works in the forestry service here, and he's been questioning that for years. So, I've heard him say, why is it that we're going through these huge, we'll have maybe one summer out of about 6 where we don't seem to have too much of an issue. Now, all of a sudden, bang, they explode and they're all here. And then everybody's, not everybody, but most people are getting them or getting sick from them. We have cases go up. And I think you answered that already. But like I said, I think there's some people aware, like you and other folks, who just have to get the message out on a louder frame. And thank God, that congressman was, worth his salt. Like I said, I try to tell everybody there still are some good people out there that work in those offices. You just gotta, it's hard to find them, but they're there. And, So what's the next step for you at this point?
Well, I continue to, in my spare time, I work a lot. I'm writing a lot about various tick-borne diseases to raise awareness. For people like you who have mystery symptoms, conventional medicine has failed you, and to give you more ideas. A test is a lot cheaper than being sick for years.
Right.
And then my book has been optioned by a documentary filmmaker. So hopefully that will be funded soon. And that would be great, because I would say the book Bitten is a great human story. It mostly focuses around this scientist who was young. He was like 26, 27 when he came over, ambitious. He wanted to be a great scientist, and then he got sucked into the biological weapons program deeper and deeper. And he went to Europe a lot and was schmoozing with communists. And somehow he ended up with a secret Swiss bank account with a lot of money. And so there's a lot of mysteries around him. And then at the end of his life, he got the disease he discovered. He was cleaning out rabbit cages on a Sunday, and some of the rabbit urine that was infected with the germs splashed in his eyes, and he got it, and he was forced to retire early, possibly because of that. And he had a crisis of conscience, and he talked to me and several other journalists, giving his little pieces of the story. And then we've all been working together and trying to piece it together like 100,000 piece puzzle, because
I've often said on other programs or my Big Dog show something along that lines where, I don't want to call it poetic justice because it's kind of sad, but at the same time, it's like those who are going to run around, live by that sword, are eventually going to fall on their own sword. I think the karmic sense of the universe, sometimes, not always, sometimes it comes around full circle. Um, like I said, I'm going to pick up the book. You got my promise on that. I'm really interested to read this, and you've touched me being on the program. Infuriated me a little. I think that's important that you do that with some folks, because you sit here and you hear this stuff, and we always have this false sense of security. Now, working in the industry all the years that I did, I always tell everybody, it's like, you think you're secure, you think you can trust doctors, lawyers, all the stuff that we have put in place. And I've got bad news for you. You really got to pick and choose, or you got to be careful and watch, because you can't always trust what you think in your mind that you can trust. It's a false sense. And to hear that they're not putting money into this research, or having this be exposed for what it is, that somebody's not doing something with you, alongside you, to take care of this, it's an outrage. It's an absolute outrage. And again, I don't want adults to get sick from this, Chris. I'm always the guy that watches the movie that's like, hey, kill all the guys and kill all the adults all you want in the movie, just leave the kids and the animals alone. Okay, that's the bigger outrage for me. And I think more about the children and a legacy that we're leaving. And like you said, throwing things out of balance, and it's just going to progressively mutate. I kind of had that sense. I don't want it to go that way, but is there going to be, I'll ask you this, is there going to be a point or something that we can do to put it down and stop this and halt this, the ticks themselves? Is there anything out there that we can do to combat that?
Well, you have to fight a multi-front war, because the circle, ground zero has grown so far. It started just around New York City, and now it's up through Maine. Maine's really hard hit now. Pennsylvania's the #1 state in the US. It's up in Canada. It's marching or creeping across the Midwest and down the Carolinas. So you have to do a combination of awareness, education, and that's what I do a lot of now, is write about it especially for kids, to get them aware. There's this new, through Pennsylvania Lyme, there's this new tick check dance, we just released, which is really fun. There's also Lyme TV, which is PSAs that educate kids who are at school on field trips or camps about ticks, how to check for them, how to not go in the areas where the ticks are, stay on the trail.
And if you would, Chris, if you have any audio strikes of that PSA, I would love you to send that back my way, and I will throw that out on all the podcasts and our networks and our music shows, because I want to help you with this. I want to help get the message out. Everybody needs to be aware and needs to do the check. So if you have anything, and I mean that
I
very
will.
sincerely,
I will.
I will put that out there. And if you're willing to come on the program or do other things here on the network with us, I want your voice to be heard. This is very important,
Yeah.
very important, and it is to me. As I said, having my little ones, that's my life, and I can't imagine, even getting adults. Like, let's say your children lost their parents and this type of stuff. This is just important. Everybody hear me? It's important. Okay. What's the other thing I was going to throw at you? This is my wheels, Chris. This is the insanity my
You're
wife
sounding
puts up
pretty
with.
good to me.
Well, I have stuff there once in a while, then I get off on something and there it goes. But you still have the floor if there's more that you want to cover. Like I said, we have no time limit here. And if I've missed anything, again, I wanted to be the guy sitting in the chair that you just run with this program and you put out everything that you want to get said.
Yeah, just LymeDisease.org. Pennsylvania. Oh, this is an important thing: is if you pull off a tick, especially if it's engorged, you can send it to PA Lyme, Pennsylvania Lyme, and if you're in Pennsylvania, they'll test the tick for free, or they'll charge a nominal amount if you're out of state. But the great thing about that is, I think a lot of times those tick tests are more accurate because they test for all the co-infections.
Right.
Your doctor won't do that because he's trying to save money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also, the Lyme disease test is not reliable in the first month because it's an antibody
that's what you're
test,
saying.
and your body hasn't developed antibodies. I mean, we know that from COVID. The whole world got that. So you can test a tick instantly versus waiting a month and a half till you're already showing symptoms to test your blood. So that's what I would do. PA Lyme has lots of resources, signs, information too.
Right. Well, I mean, how's your husband to date? Like you said, there's been this progression of getting better. How are you? How are you guys doing right now?
So after about 5 years, we're great.
Okay.
My husband got COVID though, so that's a bummer.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. Hopefully he didn't get serious with it. He just felt ill, and hopefully that's all he.
Well, he got it on Halloween appropriately, and he didn't end up in the hospital, but he's still having trouble getting his taste and smell back, which is a real bummer.
Yeah, especially if you like to eat. I know I like to eat. Yeah, that would be the bummer. We're lucky we haven't had it. We believe, due to the symptoms and everything that came out when it started happening, that I had it back in December. Asymptomatic, got very ill, didn't have any trouble breathing, didn't lose my taste or smell, but I was very ill, and it across the board, having the other stuff, I have a lowered immune anyway due to the connective tissue disorder. But I think I had it, but God bless you. Hopefully he's feeling better from that too. And as I said, it's a crazy time in the world, and just as you spoke, not to get on that whole subject, folks, but she's putting the pieces to the puzzle together that, here's something people are working on thinking, it's contained. Now we can argue all day long whether it was released on purpose. Okay. But the fact is it got out, and look what it's doing. And then the panic and the fear and everything that's ensued afterward, people are getting it. This is a real thing. But, there's other, like she said, with money and politics and things even being involved in the tick debate and things going on there. Don't think for a moment that's not going on right now with this. I just wanted to put that out there. That's my own opinion. Send the hate mail to somebody else because I won't read it. But thank you for being on the program. You hear I'm still trying to fight a cough. The one thing I had left over here with grandkids, I tell everybody they're good at spreading colds. So I got a cold about a week ago, and man, it hung in there, and we were worried. We went and got tested. We were like, man, if I have the Rona, I couldn't imagine I got it from my grandkids. But I was just like, man, but we didn't. cross the fingers. But we've been affected by that too, Chris. We've had family members and people, so God bless them, and I'm a Mason, so some of my brothers in lodge got it. And they don't even know how they got it. But they said, hey, I was sick for like 4 or 5 days with like flu. And then I had to stay home for 15, 16 days. And then I was fine. And then I have other friends that they were pretty serious, so
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you think that I'll ask you this kind of a follow-up thing at the end here. Do you think that, like you said, maybe it's going to develop into different strains, has that possibility, but do you think that we could build up an immunity to any of that at any point in time? Is that possible?
You mean Lyme disease?
Yeah.
I had one German doctor said, well, humans will develop an immunity in 1,000 years. That wasn't encouraging. He trained under Nazis, but it's going to take a while. I mean, because
I don't mean to laugh, but then you throw it at the end there. He's like, yeah, and he trained with Nazis. So, well, his word is right out the window right now. Yeah. Good Lord.
It's, we reproduce really slowly. It's going to take a while compared to insects and bacteria.
You say 1,000 years, you're kind of looking at your watch like, yeah, that's, I won't be here. I will not be here for that. Yeah, that won't happen.
Well, I mean, there is a saying amongst people with Lyme disease, it doesn't kill you. It just makes you wish you were dead.
I've been that ill. Yeah, I've been that ill. Yeah, I just before we go, just to share kind of a funny story along those. Well, not funny now. I can laugh about it now, but I had a rare peritoneum bleed behind my stomach, and there were 9 days in the hospital, or 7 of them. I was bleeding, and they call me Mr. Enigma, some of the hospital people, because it healed by itself. We have no idea what took place, but I get what you're saying. I felt so awful. I was like, I'm ready to die right now. This is how bad I feel, just so the pain is gone. But thank God that didn't happen. He figured I had more work to do out here to have people like you on the show and absolutely drive you insane with silly ass comments and questions. But you have been patient with me. I appreciate that.
No, you asked really good questions, and thank you so much for giving me a little soapbox to stand on and say ticks are falling.
That's what I wanted to do for you. That's what this program is for. We don't just, you're different than some of the other guests because we didn't want to just focus on UFOs, ghosts, and or just like a conspiracy theory, because Bob couldn't join us today. Elmer had to excuse himself, by the way, because he's having internet problems. So he wanted to let you know that it wasn't anything personally. I don't know if you watched, he was dropping in and out of the program there. He was having issues, but he said that he loves your information. He's going to be looking up your stuff. But Bob couldn't join us, the other co-host. He's an RN. So, he's busy with the COVID thing. But I don't know. It's just, we want people to have a soapbox and an open mic here to come on and talk about whatever it is that they want. Now, to me, this is kind of in the realm of strange and unusual, but then again, it's not. What's strange and unusual is that you brought up some very good points and some things that we all really should be taking a look at and think about, because that's the strange part, that there are people who probably should be paying more attention to this, but they're not. And the unusual part is, why in hell would you be doing this stuff on U.S. soil or anywhere? Why would you do this anyway? And then it gets out, accidents happen, to paraphrase what the person said to you. And it's like, man, come on. You're the same dipshits. What's that movie? You're the same dipshits trying to put torpedoes and bombs on porpoises. It's this insane thing.
Or the bat bomb. I love the bat bomb.
I remember that. Yeah. And have you ever watched bats? You're not going to control bats. God, this is just asinine stuff. But you come on here anytime you want, and you send me information to my email. It's Dan Holroyd at yahoo.com. I don't care who gets that. I ask people to send me things there all the time. It's DanHolroyd at yahoo.com. And I will put your stuff up post-production If you want a script, you want me to do voiceover, I got people that do that professionally. I do them. We will get your message out here on the network. It's a PSA that I love to share for you, Chris, and you have great information. Tell everybody where they can find you and get your book.
So
Please.
you can order it from the publisher HarperCollins or Amazon. It's on Kindle or audio. I have a really cool website, KRISNEWBY.com. That's KRISNEWBY.com. And I have these amazing pictures of Cold War biological weapons program. So it's really creepy, but seeing is believing.
Yeah. And the documentary?
So that's still in the works.
Right.
You know how it is to get films out. We'll see if it ever sees the light of day. It'll be controversial, but interesting.
Right. I've only worked on a couple things, documentary wise, and I've been featured in the world's worst horror movie. And my friend who wrote this and directed knows that it's okay that we say that. But it's a tougher thing to get done, get out there, especially with what you guys are doing, to probably get people to be able to talk and find verified, vetted for, information and sources. I don't think people realize that, when you want to put out things, you want things vetted and secured, because without the integrity of the information or something to back it behind that, it's just a great story. And you could be anybody just saying anything. So I think people should understand that too. But, listening to you, I want to thank you, because you have covered all the bases. Being that I'm from an investigative background and listening to all the extremes and things that you've gone through, when you were talking earlier about meeting this gentleman, at the party, and I listened to more of what you said, I was going to interrupt at one point and say, well, I've gone through processes where, we've convicted people in a court of law and we had less information, but we had enough that obviously pointed in, directions that you just can't deny. And, the fruit bared itself in the end, because we realized we had the right person. We tried to cross the T's and dot the I's as best we could. And it sounded like you did that. So, and being that you're college educated, and I'm not saying that makes you smarter than everybody else, but that does mean something. And you're a very intelligent lady. And I will keep telling you that, because it's great to meet somebody who's just on point.
Well, I worked at a medical school, so I always felt like the dumbest person in the room, but I'm a quick study. So, I mean, that's part of what being an engineer is. You can learn anything.
Yeah.
But
and
I have to say on my website, KRISNEWBY.com, if there's anyone who has information, I have a secure tip email, and I'll follow up on everything.
Right.
Because a lot of these biological weapons documents were destroyed, burned, and one human being can make a difference at this point.
Absolutely. That's a good message. The cats don't like the things getting out of the bag. That's why they burn and destroy things, and need to make these people accountable for everybody ready for some swear words? Everybody? Okay. They need to be held accountable for the horse shit that they've done and the things they've put out here. And the ramifications alone, in long term it's unsettling. I don't want to use the word frightening. I think unsettling probably says it better. Horrifying is probably a good term too. I don't think I'm being too extreme. I've seen ticks. I've had them on me. I've pulled them off me. I've taken them off my pets. We treat the pets. If I'm in fish, like you said, if I'm fishing in areas that's got long grass, anything that's rubbing against my pant, your arms, this is where these little devils like to hang on these little edges of these grasses and these trees. And when you brush by, they latch on. Next thing you know, they're crawling on you. I've been with friends, Chris. This is a weird thing. I've been with friends and we've done some trail walking. So I'll try to spray my clothing as best I can. Sometimes I've forgotten, and they'll get 3 or 4 of them on them, and I have nothing. So it doesn't happen to everybody. But thank you for the message.
Yeah, keep your family safe. Do tick checks.
Yes. If you got small children and pets, show them the love and the respect, spray them down, only the clothing. Don't be stupid like some people I've heard of. They're spraying your skin with this stuff. Spray your clothing down, be protected. There are plenty of videos on YouTube that'll show you how to dress and protect yourself against getting ticks and tick bites. And go to KRIS NEWBY's information and her webpage, and keep shouting at the highest tower, KRIS. Keep telling everybody about this and doing what you do. And thanks for being on the show and being so kind and understanding again with my ridiculousness and how
Thanks
I get.
So much, Dan. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you. You're doing something important. Everybody, KRIS NEWBY, go check out our information here on I Want to Believe Radio. You can listen to this program Sunday nights. We'll have it in rerun eventually during the year, so you'll be able to hear Chris again. But I'm planning, my devious little plan is to make sure we've got Bob on board next time, or I'm going to do her on my program, SMP Paranormal. Not paranormal, I'm sorry, Truth of the Matter, because we can focus on this a little more in depth. But I'd love to have Chris back, so I'll connive and try to work that out, and if she's got time to be with us. But you're also listening to us on the Michigan69podcast.com network. And we appreciate you being here. And our sponsors, of course, Henderson Castle, hendersoncastle.com, and Gun Barrel Coffee. You've had the rest, drink the best. gunbarrelcoffee.com, and Live Radio One, who motherships a lot of our programs here on Facebook. And I thank you, each and every one of you. And Chris, I thank you. And I hope that your family and you are safe where you're at. Stay away from the Rona, and try to live in some sort of sanity and what's going on in the world. And she's shaking her head. If I can make you laugh, then I know I'm doing all right. But you be safe where you're at, and you have a great rest of your week. And again, much love and much respect. Thank you for coming on the program. I appreciate your message.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Have a good week.
Thank you, Chris. You too.
Bye-bye.